expert. Yay.
Okay, here I am.
Hey, well,
Welcome.
you just joined us in time, Steve, because we've just been chatting about California Political Review, and you're familiar with that, aren't you?
Ever so slightly.
And Wendy and I are just been talking about some of the great articles you had this morning. And Wendy's favorite was, what was your favorite, Wendy?
The budget deficit thing. That was horrifying. And how the budget deficit is coming our way. I just think it's awful how we're going to bilk the feds for money. And I hope Trump doesn't fall for it, but I'm afraid he will. He's going to have to.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think Trump is going to fall for it. Yesterday, Senator Mitch McConnell made a long list of items that the states will have to change in order to get any money out of the federal government. And that includes changing a lot of laws, not just the sanctuary city law or sanctuary state law that California has and several other states have, like Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, and some others. But they also have to show some fiscal responsibility and a proof that none of the money will go towards the collapsing pension system in California or in Illinois. Next week, Illinois last week has asked for $15 billion from the federal government to keep the pension system open. The federal government said no. So this coming week, the state of Illinois is going to be going to the bond market for the $15 billion. And all the financial reporters are saying the bond market won't give them a dime of the $15 billion. And literally the Illinois pension system will collapse. And once that collapses, we're also going to see other states like California's collapse. We have Calsters, the teachers' retirement, is a little over $400 billion in unfunded liabilities. Calpers in total is over $1 trillion in unfunded liabilities. In the first 3 weeks of this pandemic, they lost $69 billion in stock equity. So it's going to be a big difference for the states if they're going to make these changes. And I must remind everybody that the governor thinks that we're in such good shape that last week he spent $30 million on a social equity program for the marijuana industry so that they could hire people not based on qualifications or skill, but on race and gender. In other words, to discriminate in the act of hiring, and $30 billion. And 2 days ago, he brought suit against Uber and Lyft for the crime of hiring people to work.
It's just disgusting. Well, we're at a little after 10, so we want to save all your good comments. We just want to welcome everybody now and do a little housekeeping things, and then turn it over to you. Okay, Steve?
That'd be great. Let me just sit up in my chair.
Okay.
And by the way, unlike the reporter for ABC back in Illinois, I am wearing pants.
Well, good to know, Steve. In fact, let me, I'll just welcome everybody here. We had a little chance to have a little preliminary chat as we waited for Steve to join us. And as we chatted, Steve is the editor, publisher of the California Political Review, and tremendous information delivered to your email box at 3 o'clock every morning, 6 days a week. So you can see the website here, capoliticalreview.com. Encourage you to go and sign up for his list, and you cannot believe what you will learn from this. And I'll just introduce everybody you see on your screen right now. in case you don't know, we've got new people. We had 9 new people that we have no idea, have never met before, sign up for this webinar. So, hey, we're welcome you. I'm Jan Soule. I'm the president of SVARW. Wendy Brukwinski is the first vice president and in charge of programs. And we'll introduce Steve in a minute. And also sitting here as our panelist is Minnie Bodine. She's our second VP. And her most important job today is to record this so that we can make it available to you probably by tomorrow, huh? Maybe, if we do this right and the president doesn't screw up again and end the meeting. Yeah, then it'll be available for everybody forever. Okay, so a few little okay. This meeting is actually our first, and we welcome Steve Frank as our first Friday forum, because we can't have regular meetings, obviously, and can't serve you, what, Wendy? Little eggs and bacon and stuff. Yeah. We want to give you content so that you can keep informed and at least be connected with your fellow conservatives. Next Friday, we have Margaret Metcalf. And if you attended any SVARW meetings last year on October 18th, we had Margaret talking about, you know, her direct experience with the deep state. Margaret is the GOP committee woman representing Guam. She also represented the governor of Guam to the executive branch of in DC for many years, and therefore has come face to face with the deep state. She gets daily briefings of what is going on with the Trump administration, and she has a lot to share. So she'll be here May 15th, and you can sign up for that on our website. May 22nd, how many people are concerned about opening Santa Clara County and California? So we invited the only Republican member of the Board of Supervisors, Mike Wasserman, and he's going to give us an update on opening Santa Clara County, and that's the 22nd. And then on the 27th, we'll have our regular SVARW meeting, and that's on a Wednesday, and with Malcolm McGough. And he's really going to talk to us about the latest in the Trump victory campaign and probably what part California could actually really play in changing the government here. Okay. And we can only do this now because we have wonderful SVARW sponsors that have paid actually $500 each to support SVARW this year. And many of those have businesses, and we routinely promote their businesses on our website and on our email blasts. And we also, this is also possible because we have, in addition to our sponsors, we have members that are Patriot Gold, Reagan, and regular members. If you're not a member, consider joining us because we need support during this pandemic. And a membership in SVARW is only $30 for a year. So that's all. You can go to our website and join. Feel free to donate. We've got a little donate thing up there too. Feel free to donate. And right now, invite all your friends. All our meetings are free. When we've had meetings at Three Flames, obviously they couldn't be free to everyone because we have to pay for breakfast. So in order to use the room. But now, right now, they're free. So invite your friends.
Hell, he is the go-to guy for everything in politics. And just as point of introduction here, he's a political consultant, he's a conservative activist, and the editor, of course, of California Political News and Views, which really you might consider signing up for because I get so much information from that. So he's the go-to guy for everything in politics. Started out in 1960 walking precincts for Nixon, managed an office for Goldwater, worked as the youth for Reagan in 1966, and then he worked his way up to where he was working on a Simon for Governor campaign in 2002. He's done all sorts of stuff, strategist for Jones for Senate, coalition director for Giuliani for president. That would have been an interesting one. As an activist, he gives about 50 to 100 speeches a year. This is one of them throughout the states. And he's done this for more than 20 years. He's trying to get us inspired so that we do something here towards the good. He does 6 to 9 radio interviews weekly, typically, which was another place you might have heard him at. He's a really good speaker for them. He's very active in the California Republican Party. He's worked campaigns for all the way from San Diego up to Del Norte in the north there. And since 1996, he's published his California Political News and Reviews. Here today, he's going to tell us about what's going on. What does he think are going to be the long-term effects of all of this police state stuff that we're all living under right now? And what the heck is up with that $1 billion mask deal that Newsom signed with China? So it's my pleasure now to introduce Steve Frank.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Really appreciate the introduction. This is my third Zoom speech in the last week. It's a great experience, but let me start with this. Harry Truman, this may shock some people, may be my favorite quotable president. He said that I don't give them hell, I just tell the truth and they think it's hell. And I believe it's about time the Republican Party here in California start acting like a political party and giving the Democrats hell. Let me give you one example. In the last 6 weeks, the governor of the state of California, whom I call the supreme leader, has given us 37 new executive orders in which he changed 172 laws of the state of California. We didn't change the laws with hearings. We didn't change the laws with a vote of the legislature or notification to the public for their input. But instead, the supreme leader has made a determination that he's going to change the legislation of California, that he is going to be the only one to make decisions for the state of California. And anybody who's elected to the Assembly or State Senate, you can keep collecting your salary, but we don't need you. Yesterday, several thousand people showed up at the Capitol to protest on the National Day of Prayer. And what did they find when they got there? That the governor had put up fencing around the Capitol so that people can't get onto the Capitol, which they own, not him. Across the street from the Capitol is a parking structure that holds lots of cars. It's 6 stories high, and holds a couple, 3,000 cars. He closed that off so the protesters could not get involved. There is a bill, AB 262, and I'm sorry to say that the county I'm from, which is Ventura, may be the first county to employ AB 262. And what this bill does, which almost nobody knew existed until the health director of Ventura County announced it about 3 days ago, is that if they find trackers or tracing that you had come into contact with somebody who had the coronavirus, they can come into your house and take your children from you, take grandma from you, and leave you alone in the house. Or if they don't think the house is safe enough, i.e. enough bathrooms for the people in there, that the government can take people out of the house on those grounds alone. And so what we now have is a state where literally we're no longer safe in our homes with a bill that was passed a long time ago, AB 262, and it's going to be enforced. And even though it was Dr. Robert Levin, who announced it in Ventura County, when I did research on that bill, it seems that Governor Newsom last week made a similar statement that he was going to use state legislation to forcibly move people from their homes if it was deemed in the public interest. Taking kids away from parents is not in the public interest, but that's the way the government works. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to face in the future from this. We have accepted, sadly, a house arrest. Yes, they call it shelter in place. Is no different than being arrested and forced to stay in your house. Our business has been closed. Our jobs have been lost. Our right to petition government has been taken away. Our right to assemble in the First Amendment has been taken away. Our free speech has been taken away. One of the first things that Governor Newsom tried to do when the pandemic was declared was to close all gun shops. And now that he's trying to stop all protests in the state, we could see why he's doing that. He's afraid that the people are going to rebel against his anti-constitutional leadership. But early on in this conversation, somebody mentioned the $53 billion deficit that we're going to face next year. And that is the official total issued by the Finance Department of the state of California. And that is a lie. It is not 53 billion or close to 54. It is actually 75 billion. Because what is a deficit? A deficit is the spending of more money than you received in revenues. And they're saying it's $53 billion. Actually, to get to zero deficit, you first have to spend $21 billion in our so-called rainy day fund, the reserve fund. So they're spending $21 billion. They have a deficit of $54 billion for a total of $75 billion as the total deficit. And that's what we're facing. Interestingly enough, this morning, Mayor Faulkner of San Diego, who himself is facing a massive deficit, said, and I was shocked he would say this, but he said, you know, this deficit is so large, we can't tax our way out of the deficit. Now, that's an interesting statement because what was the first thing that he, as a Republican mayor of a city, said? Well, we could tax people, but we can't tax them enough to get out of the deficit. Well, the same is true of the state of California. But let me add, we have the $75 billion deficit, but 2 days ago, by executive order, in violation of the state constitution, the governor issued an executive order changing the method of receiving workers' compensation in California. In the past, if somebody wants to apply for workers' comp, they would then have to go to a hearing and they would have to be ruled approved to receive workers' comp. Under the new rule, under the new law issued by the governor, without a vote of the legislature, without a hearing, if you have the coronavirus, you can imply that it was because of working, and you will automatically, without having any hearing, receive workers' comp, which also means that the businesses that you worked for will have their workers' compensation rate increased. And in the first year alone, it will cost a minimum of $11.2 billion transferred from small businesses to the government to pay for to pay for workers' compensation. And so we have a situation where not only do we have a deficit, but the governor is literally putting his hand in the pockets of small business that already have enough trouble because he won't allow them to open up. He's going to take $11 billion from them. That's money that could have been used to hire more employees, to expand businesses, to open businesses, to reopen businesses. And he's just decided by his magic wand to take $11.2 billion at a minimum to give to government from small business. These are the economic realities that we are facing going forward in California over the next few years. It is sad to say that we've had a legislature that has been quiet. They've not said we need to go back to work. They have not said we need to change laws. We're just going to allow the governor to do it without our vote. And so he could take the heat for it. He could take the responsibility for it. But instead, it is their job, and they are not doing the job. Quite frankly, people have been laid off from shoe shops, shoe repair shops, from liquor stores, from manufacturing plants. And I think we need to lay off the members of the Assembly and the Senate for refusing to work during this last few weeks. It's not that they couldn't work, they have refused to work, and they should be fired for that. But at a minimum, they shouldn't be taking their salary. And so then you have the data. Now, interestingly enough, everybody asks the same question. When is California going to reopen? When will the governor issue a reopening statement? Now, as you know, he's taking great credit for reopening California today. But he's not really reopening California. As Stanislaus County Supervisor Kristen Olson made mention yesterday, she said that the grand opening of California is only good in those communities of 2,500 or less. Almost nowhere else in California would qualify for the criteria that Newsom has given us to reopen the state. So I'm not one of those that believes Newsom is going to reopen the state at all. What he did say last week was he will totally reopen the state when we have a vaccine. Well, as you all know, that vaccine is a year off, certainly by December at the earliest, if possible, but it's more likely to be a year off. So what the governor said, without using the right words, the correct words, the appropriate words, is that the state of California is going to be closed until sometime the summer of 2021 under his rule and guidance. That's not going to happen. We are already seeing businesses opening up against the advice of and permission of the governor. There's a great barber, I think it's in Alameda County, who opened up his shop, went on national TV on Fox and said he's not going to close his shop. He has a family to feed. At least they didn't arrest him like they did down the hairdresser down in Dallas, Shelley Luther, and jail her. He's not being jailed. He's not being fined. But all over the state, businesses are opening up. So what does the governor do? In the next couple of days, I'm doing a story in my newsletter. The California Liquor Alcohol Beverage Control Board has announced that if you are a restaurant and have beer, wine, or a liquor license and open up, we're going to take away your license. The Barber and Cosmetology Board has announced if you cut hair, we're going to take away your license. And so one by one, the state agencies are threatening, blackmailing, and extorting people into poverty, into being forced to being survivors of a poverty policy of the governor, who's more like a supreme leader. And instead of working and feeding their families, people will be dependent totally upon government. And that's what the goal is at the very end of the day of Newsom and the other blue state governors. They want people to be dependent on government, not on themselves. And if you have a business, it's only because government allows you to have a business. For many years, I've been writing in my newsletter about getting rid of these crazy licensing boards. I mean, why does it take the state of California to approve you to braid hair in this and get paid for it? In the state of California, it's illegal for you to braid hair and get paid for it without a license from the state of California. And the state of Texas, interestingly enough, is in the process of getting rid of over half of its licensing boards because Governor Abbott down there understands freedom. If I don't like the way you braid my hair, I'm not going to go back to you, whether or not you have a state credential. Doesn't matter. But if you do a good job, I don't care if you have a credential, if you do a good job. And that's the way most consumers want. They want a good job. They're not looking for the government. I mean, let's get serious. Can we trust government after they lied to us so often about the extent of this coronavirus, about the number of deaths that we're going to have that scared us into closing the society? We have an opportunity, though, in November to make a change. It's not going to be a big change because this is California and the Democrats are outnumbering us immensely. But that goes back to my original statement about Harry Truman, that we need to give the Democrats hell. It's about time that the Republican Party and Republican leadership stop playing nice, stop playing by the rules of the game, and understand that in politics and in policy, under the Democrats, there are no rules. If there were rules, the Democrats would overthrow Joe Biden in a moment for his sexual harassment and his years of the photographic proof and video proof of his groping and fondling of young girls and women over the years. And that's photographic proof and video proof. So if the Democrats really wanted to play by the rules of the Me Too generation, then they would get rid of Biden and denounce him. Instead, what does Biden do? He gets 3 people to help him in his choice of candidate for vice president, one of whom is former Connecticut Senator Chris Dodd, who famously admitted to having a threesome in a back of a restaurant with another U.S. Senator by the name of Ted Kennedy. It's very famous. I mean, he was very, very open about it. And now the Democrats are saying this is the type of person they want to choose, a female candidate for vice president. So we in the Republican Party have to get angry. We have to become aggressive. We can no longer just sit back and hope somebody else speaks out on our behalf. I'll finish with this before I answer the questions. In the 25th Congressional District where I live, we're having a special election on Tuesday. In the 28th Senatorial District in Riverside, we're having a special election for the state Senate. Interestingly enough, in the 25th District where I live, since October of 2018 till February of 2020, the Democrats out-registered Republicans by 17,000. The previous holder of the office defeated a Republican by 7 points, yet on Tuesday, the number of absentee ballots that have been given in so far by the voters in the 25th District are, and I'll round off the numbers, 50,000 for the Democrats, 61,000 for the Republicans, and 18,000 for decline to state, NPP. So even though we're out registered, more Republicans have turned in the ballots than Democrats. In the same way, in the 28th District, there's an 11,000 ballots difference between Republicans and Democrats. And even though there are 3,000 more Democrats registered in that district, there are 11,000 more Republicans that have voted in that district. And so the Republicans can make a difference, but that's from the grassroots making phone calls. I'm sure they're in the Santa Clara area, as well as the rest of the Bay Area and Northern California, as well as down here in the South. Millions of calls have been made on behalf of both Mike Garcia in the 25th Congressional and Melissa Melendez in the 28th Senatorial. This is grassroots. It's not paid professionals doing it. It's we the people doing it. We are angry with Sacramento. We're angry with Washington. We want to have good representation. But grassroots operations, volunteers, calling talk shows, writing letters to the editor, calling their friends, making sure people come out to vote, helping candidates for city council and school board and board of supervisors and judge, as well as assembly, state senate, and Congress. That is what we do best. And you don't need to be a professional to know that if you tell your neighbor to vote for Mike Garcia in my district, and you live in the district, that means something. And we need to get the volunteers back on track, just like they were in 2016 for President Trump in California. The volunteers made over 3 million calls in California, but to other states. And therefore, we can show how the volunteers make a difference. Each one of the 5 swing states, Trump won, that were targeted by those 3 million calls. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking to you today, and I look forward to answering your questions. And this is a time for all of us to unite behind our candidates and behind our country. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And that Mike Garcia thing is very important. We actually had an activity last week where we were training panelists phone callers with phone banking and trying to get as much phone banking as we can do. Okay, we're going to try something new here where you guys raise your hand, ask a question if you'd like. First question, though, comes in the chat box, and it's from Jane. And she wants to ask you about what's with Ro Khanna's initiative to bring Silicon Valley to the Midwest. And isn't that a lot like the way China invested in different countries and who is going to own what in the end?
Yeah, I'm not sure what his initiative is, but I have heard that the Silicon Valley folks are trying to expand to other parts of the country because the cost of living, cost of housing, the traffic problems are so great in the Silicon Valley that they can't get the quality people, they think. And so North Carolina and Austin and Boston, of all places, have become major centers. And now Indianapolis is trying to become a center in the Midwest. And Ohio is also working on bringing companies there. And one of the great selling points is the quality of life. Let's get real. If you live in this, you guys live there. You know what the traffic is like at 9 o'clock in the morning, trying to get from one end of town to the other. And in these other towns, you can get from one end of Columbus, Ohio to the other in about 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. I know, it's bad. Okay, in the chat box from James, he wants to know, he's astonished and elated when the bad Prop 13 went down to defeat the recent primary. Are there lessons to learn about the mood of the electorate here?
Oh boy, I'm glad that was asked. There were if I remember correctly, there were 357 different bond and tax measures on the March 3rd ballot. 357. Of them, only 92 passed.
Yeah.
Only 92. Now, let's talk about the education bond, the bad Prop 13. That was a $26 billion bond. And we knew months ago that was going to be defeated because in the city of Los Angeles, which is very liberal, they had a $500 million bond for LAUSD, and that was defeated. The people in LA said no to a bond. No one can remember the last time a school bond in LA was defeated. The bad Prop 13 was the first one in about 26 years that was defeated. The people in California have become aware of the failure of government education. We do not have public education in California. We have government education. Just like we don't have public transportation, we have government transportation. And the government education has put us down to the lowest. We're the 15th state, the lowest of the 15 states in standardized tests. If I remember correctly, 24% of 8th graders can match the quality in English, and 18% in math in the 8th grade. Total failures. And while Harvard University and the unions are trying to kill homeschooling, I think we're going to see a transformation of education because of this pandemic. And the governor made mention that he wants the schools to start again in July, but he's going to have scattered schedules. That means some kids in the morning, some kids in the afternoon. If you're a parent that works, how difficult is it going to be to show up at the school 4 times a day to bring or get your child? If you have 2 kids and more otherwise. And it may be that what they call distance learning, online learning, is the way to go. Interestingly enough, few people know it. You can get a 2-year degree from the community colleges online in the state of California. Better yet, Wendy, if you are a parent of a UCLA student and you hate to see them come down to Westwood, they don't have to anymore. Starting in the fall semester, UCLA, from freshman to senior, online education, and it's the student's choice of going on campus or going on the internet and inconveniencing millions of electrons.
Wow, that's very interesting. Do you see any end in sight for the horrific education that California offers? How's that ever going to turn around?
When the parents decide to rebel against it. It's too often. I'll give you an example. In Ventura County, there's a school district that I'm familiar with that has a curriculum, an online curriculum with a teacher. And I talked to one of those students in the 5th grade about 2 weeks ago, and that student told me that she learned how bad plastic is to our society and to our earth.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing about how important it is to sanitation, how important it is for those in impoverished nations to have clean drinking water out of plastic bottles instead of drinking murky river water, and all the other values. Never told that almost everything in our lives, including the computers we're working on, has oil in it because plastic is oil.
Mm-hmm.
They use oil as part of it. And so this indoctrination is going on, and parents are now, for the first time, learning what the somebody just called, just learning how their children are being taught. I think we're going to have a lot more homeschooling, a lot more distance learning, and a lot more questioning by the parents. And I don't think the schools district's going to get another dime. I should note that under the new budget, school districts for K through 12 and community colleges will get $18 billion less this year than planned. And what was planned? Well, less than they got last year. But what was planned was a $13 billion increase. In other words, the amount of money the school districts are going to get is going to be down by $31 billion in total.
Wow, that's a lot less teachers. I'd also heard that they're very much against allowing homeschooling because it disallows the opportunity for them to indoctrinate our kids.
Well, the reason they give, and I love this, you know, unless you've gone through the education process at the UC system and the state colleges and passed the standardized tests and are qualified and credentialed, you're not smart enough to teach.
Very true.
America was built on teachers without credentials. Yeah. We got here without credentials. We got here because of good teachers that knew what they were doing. Now, of course, as once you get your credential, it's a lifetime job, and no one can question what you're teaching. And right. Parents now are beginning to question. So I think this is going to make a change because the unions are just going to go ballistic because with $31 billion less, how do they go in to ask for more money when there literally is no more money? And one of the things I think is going to happen, and we've seen a little bit of it, but we're going to see a massive amount, no more textbooks. All textbooks will be online, and the kids will have computers and be given broadband internet connection where there isn't any, so they can participate as well. But I think we're going to get rid of the dead tree industry of killing trees to print textbooks that aren't accurate in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Okay, veering away from that subject, there's a couple of questions here about executive orders that violate the First, Second, Fifth, and 14th Amendment. And what's up with court challenges? We were trying to get Harmeet to come and talk to us about the different challenges that she's put up, but what do you see coming?
There's going to be many lawsuits against the government for closing of businesses, for the so-called shelter in place, and the extent of it, the taking away the rights of cities and counties to make their own rules. Because, quite frankly, I live in Simi Valley, which is an entirely different community than San Jose, and which is different than Lakeport up in Lake County. We're all different, and we need to have different rules for opening up. And it's not one rule for 40 million people. Harmeet has done a superb job, along with Mark Muser, who's her co-counsel in most of those cases, to present the constitutional questions. 2 days ago, Judicial Watch's challenge to the $75 million that Newsom is just going to give to illegal aliens, just because they're illegal aliens, was ruled by a California court as legal. Of course, that's a felony violation in the federal courts, because it's illegal. It's a felony to assist an illegal alien. So what the governor has done under the federal law is a felony. And eventually we'll get to that point and we'll get it stopped. Unfortunately, that $75 million will be given out before we could stop it. But no, there's lots of challenges. This is going to make the one growth industry that's going to come out of this is attorneys. Yes. They will have lots of lawsuits out of this.
Yeah. Okay, Ken Olafson, you mentioned Calpers and Calsters as severely underfunded. Will their funding mechanisms change? Will the state come out with bankruptcies, reducing payouts? What do you see ahead for that?
Eventually, they're going to have to reduce payouts. They are bankrupt. They are bankrupt now by every textbook CPA method. They just don't want to admit it. And that's the big problem. Newsom was lieutenant governor for 8 years, and Governor Brown tried to do a reform, didn't work. And in the year and a half that he's been governor, Newsom has not provided any reform of the system, knowing that it's going bankrupt. And that's a big problem. There's going to be people who are not going to get their paycheck. There's a case in the state Supreme Court that was heard earlier this week. One of the ways that government helps employees when they get near retirement, they give them a big bump in title with a big bump in pay for 16 to 18 months. Then their pension is based on that new pay raise. And that is being challenged in court by the Alameda Sheriff's Department.
Yeah.
So we are going to have a collapse. There are pension plans in Rhode Island and Alabama that have already cut pensions from 50% back to zero, no pension at all, because there's no money to pay.
Makes sense. Apologies for the dogs barking in the background in my office here. Imagine that. Anyway, the last question is there's a bunch of different comments and questions here about, is there any aggressive group within the Republican Party? Is there anything going on with the CAGOP leadership to take back California? Do you want to talk to us about, is there any help coming for Republicans?
The Republican Party in California hasn't had a voter registration program since March of 2013, 7 years ago. When I got involved in politics in 1960, it was drilled into me that there are 3 reasons for a political party: voter registration, get out the vote, and educate the public in between elections. Those are the 3 basic foundation reasons for a party. We are doing a bit of get out the vote for the 25th and the 28th. That's a good thing. But in reality, the state party has made a decision that voter registration isn't important. Here's what the problem is, and in the Silicon Valley, you know the problem, and here it is. When you have less Republican registration, you get less qualified people running as Republicans for office. The lower the registration, the lower the quality of the candidate. Good people, well-intentioned, but they are not quality people that can win an election to get the traction to do it. And so in the end, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to close down the party. When you don't do voter registration, you then have, in fact, in this election, there are 33 Assembly, State Senate, and congressional districts without a Republican on the November ballot. 33. We're more of a regional party now than a state party. And the second part of your question, which I think is the most important, where's the leadership? Leadership always comes from the ground, not from the top. And there has been a formation of a large number of conservative organizations and leaders that are going to be providing the needed representation for Republicans and for conservatives in the state of California. Pat Buchanan had a great statement. He was asked when he was running for president, you don't have enough money to get your message out to your troops to tell them what to do. And his response was, they know what to do, they don't have to be told. Everyone on this call knows that voter registration is important. Educating the public is important. Getting out the vote is important. Communicating with the general public, not just preaching to the choir, that's important. And so we know what to do. We don't have to be told by somebody getting $250,000 a year to tell us, no, we're not going to register voters. So, yeah, there's going to be new aggressive leadership for Republicans and conservatives in the state, and it comes from the ground up.
And you see that happening soon, hopefully?
It is already in the process.
Good. Anybody we should get behind here?
Well, just to be aware, there's already 4 candidates for governor for 2022.
Not
And
John Cox.
The 4 candidates, I'm no value judgment here, I'm just giving you names. John Cox, Travis Allen, Doug Osee, the former congressman from the Sacramento area, and the Socialist Republican mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer.
Yikes.
Okay. Those are the 4 that have popped up. Also, you should know that you should also know that State Senator Pat Bates is looking at running for Secretary of State.
Really?
Really?
Interesting. Okay. Well, we can go for that. That's interesting. But you think that John Cox is actually going to jump in again?
Yes.
And trap?
The only question about Cox and Faulconer is whether or not they'll run as Republicans or NPP. That we don't know.
Okay. And Cox definitely will self-fund, I assume. Does Faulconer have a lot of money?
Oh, yes. He has the whole Sacramento staff. The people that gave you Neil Kashkari are the people behind Faulconer.
Oh, yikes.
And remember, Kashkari was a Obama donor and an Obama voter.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I also remember that $250,000 a year head of CAGOP saying that she doesn't talk about Trump, which is kind of really pathetic.
Well, no, that's not quite correct. What she said was she doesn't want our candidates to talk about Trump. She doesn't want to mention Trump's name. And the problem with that is that if you don't do that, you're going to not only alienate the Democrats, but you're also going to alienate the Trump voters. I mean, if you're not willing to support the president, what values do you have? And
Right.
so she's made it a very bad choice for the candidates. And so I get concerned about the party literally saying, ignore the president of the United States.
Exactly. I couldn't believe that I actually read that. That
But,
was
but the important thing about it is she didn't just happen to say it in a speech in Napa. She literally went into the offices of the LA Times, literally met with George Skelton, and gave him an interview in his office to let the world know that she doesn't support Trump for president, or at least doesn't think our candidates should mention they support Trump for president or that they even know his name.
well, on that point, I think I'm done with her at least. Anyway, thank you so much. Always very interesting, always educational. And by the way, just to let you know, Steve's agreed that he'll come back monthly or so to let us know what other nefarious things are going on in our government and what we can do about it.
I'd be glad to give you a monthly short report on legislation and the status of the state of California. And
That'd be
thank you
great.
so much for the opportunity of being with you today.
Thank you. And I'm turning it back over to Jan, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, I'm sure there's people on this call who heard things for the very first time, that the head of the California Republican Party refuses to have candidates acknowledge Donald Trump. And I hope that they'll remember to go sign up for California Political Review. You can get this information every morning, 3 o'clock in the morning.
And it's
6 days
free.
a week. And it's free. And I don't know, Steve, how you have the time to put this all together every day. It's just amazing to me.
Sleep is for wimps.
Okay. And I have one last question. We do have, I know, quite a few little grassroots organizations, really quite scattered, not connected. Is there a plan how we can all get connected? Because I totally believe that of the Republicans in this state, far more of them are conservative than Rhino. Okay. So how can we all get connected?
Well, we're working on putting a list together of all those independent Republican clubs, independent conservative clubs around the state to join a grand coalition of Republicans and conservatives. That's in the works right now.
That is great to hear, Steve. I think that, as you said, people are waking up and they're finding out that if they do nothing and just sit back, this is where we end up with the People's Republic of California. So I will thank you, Steve, and I appreciate your willingness to come back. And we just thank you for all you do. Okay.
Have a great day.
You too, Steve. Take care.
Thank you.
And to our audience, as in any Zoom call, all we can say is goodbye. And we welcome you to come back next Friday.